Hey everybody, welcome back to Never Have I Had the Urge. Before we move forward, I wanted to pause for a moment. This time of year has a way of doing that, slowing us down, making us look back, not just at what we've done, but who we were when we did it. When I first pressed record on this podcast, I didn't really know what it was going to become. I had an idea, I had a feeling, and I had more questions than answers. I didn't know who would listen, I didn't know what stories would land, and I didn't even know if I'd make it past the first episode. But somehow, here we are, 4 episodes in, a season taking shape, and the quiet realization that this urge to tell stories, to reflect, to sit with moments that changed us, was worth listening to. And just to be clear, this isn't a reflection on both the good and not so good things from 2025. It's not a new year, new me moment either. This is about staying grounded in the present, grounded in the fact that I know I'm still green in this podcasting journey. And I'm okay with that. Because being green means there's room to grow, to slowly ripen, to learn, and eventually to bear fruit for myself and for everyone who's been listening along the way. So, before we step into what's next, I wanted to take a moment to look back. Not to replay the episodes, but to reflect on what they've given me. This episode is about reflection, about gratitude, about learning, and about hope. Today, I want to walk back through each episode, not as a recap, but as a conversation with the person I was when I recorded them. Before we're done, I want to share something from the very beginning, the original pilot episode, the place where this all started. So if you've been here since the start, or if you're just joining me now, thank you for being here. Let's take a moment and look back. The pause, the hesitation, that space where you're deciding whether or not to move forward. I remember when I first had the idea to start a podcast, about 2 years ago now. It was at the 3rd meetup I had attended. That's where the inspiration hit. That's where the idea for the original pilot episode came from, the one I never published. And it wasn't because I thought it wasn't good. If I'm being honest, I think I was afraid that it was too good. At least too good for where I thought I was at the time. That fear quietly turned into doubt. And doubt turned into procrastination. I started tweaking, retweaking, writing, rewriting, overthinking every line, until eventually the thing that once excited me became unusable. So I scrapped it. And instead of leading me with that pilot, I started this podcast with Leap of Faith, which, looking back now, feels fitting because that's exactly what it was, a leap of faith. Reflection has shown me that courage doesn't usually arrive fully formed. It shows up quietly, often disguised as motion. Starting didn't make me feel fearless, it just made me present. And that presence mattered more than I realized at the time. Looking back now, I'm grateful I didn't wait to feel ready. Because if I had, this story and this season might not exist at all. And that's what reflection has given me. Not answers, but clarity. The second episode, Porch Pirate, was the first time this podcast stopped feeling like something I was doing alone. Because after that episode went out, people reached out. Not to critique it, not to analyze it, but to share. They told me about the moments they had, small frustrations, everyday urges, times where they laughed or paused or saw themselves in the story. And that's where gratitude really entered the picture for me. Because storytelling stops being a monologue the moment someone recognizes themselves in it. One of the things that really stayed with me from that episode was the realization sometimes people don't steal because they're bad people. Sometimes they steal out of need. And sometimes it's the urge that comes from opportunity. That doesn't make it right, but it does make it human. Porch Pirate wasn't about the theft or annoyance. It was about how ordinary moments can connect us when we slow down enough to notice them. And it reminded me that most of the stories we tell, mine included, aren't about villains and heroes. They're about moments, decisions, and circumstances that push people to act. I became grateful not just for the people listening, but for the responsibility that comes with being heard. Because once someone gives you their time, you owe them presence, you owe them honesty, and you owe them care. Have you ever had a moment of doubt in yourself, in your abilities, in your job, in your relationships? Maybe even doubt about your life as a whole. I don't know about everyone else, but I know I have. And you know what's actually kind of crazy to me? Those moments, those doubts and fears, they've taught me gratitude. Because when I finally get to the other side of them, there's this quiet moment where I get to say to myself, "There, Vic, that wasn't that bad. You made it." One of the biggest things I've learned is this: it really is darkest before dawn. If we keep pushing forward, if we don't turn back, we eventually get to that dawn. And when we do, we get to stand there for a moment in the morning light with the perspective that only comes from having walked through the dark. When I think about hope, I don't think about wishful thinking. I think about survival. Hurricane Andrew just wasn't a storm. It was a moment that stayed with me, a reminder of how quickly things can change and how fragile everything really is. But it was also a reminder of something else, that even after devastation, life continues. People rebuild, communities come back together, and somehow we move forward carrying what we've learned. Hope for me today isn't about believing nothing bad will happen. It's about knowing that when it does, we're capable of enduring it. And once you live through something like that, you don't look at the future the same way. You don't rush, you respect. And you carry hope not as an idea, but as an experience. Before we close, I wanted to go back to the beginning, to the original pilot episode, the place where this all started. It was recorded before this podcast had a name, before there was a plan, before there was clarity. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it still matters. So I want to share it with you now, in its entirety. Not as some relic, but as a reminder of where this journey began. Final pilot. Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Victor, and this is Never Have I Had the Urge. According to Wikipedia, an urge is defined as a strong desire or impulse. Have you ever had a strong desire or impulse you just couldn't resist? Maybe a late night snack you promised yourself you wouldn't have, or the pull to check your phone one more time before going to sleep. Never Have I Had the Urge is a show about the impulses we resist, the temptations we fall into, and the stories that define who we are when we say yes or when we say no. Have you ever experienced a moment when a thought from the past came back into your mind and you cringed just remembering it? Shuddered at something you did long ago, a mistake you wish you could take back, something stupid you said or did that left you saying to yourself, "Wow, what was I thinking?" I'm your host, Victor Jimenez, and this is Never Have I Had the Urge, Until I Did. This show dives into those moments that still make us cringe sometimes, those memories where we catch ourselves saying, "Never have I had the urge to do something like that, until I did." Each episode will look into those stories, mine, yours, and those of our guests. Stories that expose the raw, awkward human side of decision making. Some will be funny, some embarrassing, and some maybe even a little painful. But through it all, let's be honest, curious, and reflective. This isn't about shame. No, it's about showing ourselves some grace, laughing a little, learning a little, and maybe realizing we're not as alone as we sometimes think we are. You know, every superhero and supervillain has their origin story. Peter Parker bitten by a radioactive spider to become Spider-Man. Bruce Banner blasted by gamma rays to become the Incredible Hulk. And this podcast, well, there are no superheroes or supervillains here, but there are some super nice people who I met at the meetup who are part of the inspiration behind the origin of this podcast. The urge for me to create a podcast didn't occur overnight. It was a result of a few things slowly building up over the course of almost 2 years. Back then, I was searching for something new to do, a hobby, something to keep me busy. I needed a spark. And like the Bruce Springsteen lyric from his song Dancing in the Dark, I ain't nothing but tired. Man, I'm just tired and bored with myself. That line resonated with me because it was exactly how I was feeling at the time. Tired and bored with myself. I had tried hobbies before, but deep down I knew the truth. Whatever hobby or next great idea I chose probably wouldn't last. I'd get all excited, imagine myself diving in, only for it to fizzle out almost immediately. Just like a child's sparkle on the 4th of July. Big spark, quick burnout. That was my MO. So the real question was, why would this time be any different? After entertaining the idea with some friends about a new hobby, one of them suggested, hey man, why don't you join one of those meetup groups? A meetup group, I thought. Then I said, what the hell, why not? I don't have anything better to do right now. So I downloaded an app and started browsing. There were hundreds of groups in my area, plenty of single meetups. I wasn't looking for love at that time. I was looking for a hobby. And as you all know, love is definitely not a hobby. There were also a lot of meetups related to my line of work. But the idea of me putting in a full day at work, only to rush off after work and meet up with a group of people to spend the evening sitting around talking about work, felt more than a little redundant to me. Then one group caught my eye. I don't know why, but it did. The Triangle Content Creators Meetup, a group for podcasters, YouTubers, TikTokers, bloggers, and so on. They met once a month, Raleigh one month, Durham the next. So purely out of curiosity, I thought, let's give it a try. But trust me, I already knew it wasn't going to last. The first meetup I attended was in Raleigh, and to my surprise, it was actually warm and very welcoming. It was organized by Javier Leiva, the creator and host of the Pretend podcast. And as I walked into that first meetup, the vibe in the room hit me like a gentle wave. It was inviting, like stepping into a big, cozy living room filled with strangers who instantly felt like friends. They served pizza that evening, slices of cheesy goodness, and cold drinks that seemed to quench more than just your thirst. It kind of fueled a budding sense of community in the room. But what struck me most wasn't just the food or the welcoming smiles. It was the beautiful mosaic of people there. It wasn't just diversity for diversity's sake. It felt like each person brought a story, a flavor, and their warmth. It actually really was nice. But for me, as always, I still felt a little antsy. I don't know why. Maybe it's that little introvert in me. That primal fear of walking into a dark forest alone or into a room full of strangers and thinking that everyone is looking at you when they're actually not. But the conversations here were alive with passion. I remember an older food blogger and how he shared his enthusiasm for his new YouTube channel. A young lady nearby raved about the game-changing green screen feature on TikTok. Her excitement infectious as she talked about quirky transition and creative storytelling possibilities on her phone. People having conversations about starting a podcast, their dreams, the technical hurdles, real passions gaining momentum as Javier Leiva made his way into the room and was warmly introduced to the group. The next month's meetup was in downtown Durham at a place called the American Underground, an old tobacco warehouse turned startup hub. The vibe there was the same. Familiar faces from the month before, a quick meet and greet with Javier, and just like that, something sparked. Maybe I could try my hand at podcasting. That night, the group had a guest speaker, Mike the credit guy from Greensboro, And between him and Javier, they made the evening fun and inspiring. Truth be told, I'd never listened to a podcast before, not once. But I'd always been a fan of true crime. My sister is a retired 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, and I always enjoyed the stories she would tell around the dinner table when she first became a cop. I also loved true crime books. One writer, Ann Rule, was the first author who really pulled me in with her writing style. Her books weren't just about the crimes or the criminals who committed them. They were about the victims, their families, and the lives forever changed. I can still remember reading her books late into the night. In a way, Ann Rule was my first true crime podcast. Only hers was on paper in between the pages of her books. That night on the drive home, I listened to my very first podcast. You guessed it, Pretend. And right then I became a fan. I was hooked. So I made a decision. That's it. I'm going to be a podcaster. Even though I knew absolutely nothing about podcasting, this was going to be my next big thing. I got home, I went on Amazon, I ordered a bunch of stuff, a mic, boom arm, headphones, books for beginners, guides on recording, editing, producing, the works. When it all arrived, I unboxed it, stared at it, and thought, okay, now what? I had no clue what I was doing. And just like the hobbies before this one, the spark immediately fizzled out. The fire burned down to embers, then ashes. It was over for me, that fast. But even still, I decided to go to the following month's meetup, hoping to get some answers on what I needed to do to become a podcaster. I got there, I saw Javier, walked up, shook his hand and said, "Hey man, I just listened to your podcast for the first time the other night and I loved it." And instantly I thought, great, I sound like a geek. Total cringe moment. Javier just smiled, nodded politely, and kept walking. He'd probably heard that 1,000 times before. And as I watched him walk away to mingle with the other wannabe content creators in the room, I remembered this hilarious old Saturday Night Live skit with William Shatner, who's best known for his role as Captain James T. Kirk from the Starship Enterprise in the original Star Trek series. William Shatner, playing himself, is at a Star Trek convention surrounded by die-hard Trekkies, played by Dana Carvey, Nora Dunn, and John Lovitz, all of them dressed in ill-fitting Star Trek costume. John Lovitz even had these hilarious plastic Mr. Spock ears on. Dana raises his hand and asks William Shatner a silly question about if he remembered the combination on a safe he opened while filming an episode of the original series back in the 1960s. At first, Shatner seems to humor them, and then starts off by saying, "Having received all of your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled hundreds of miles just to be here tonight. I'd just like to say, get a life, will you people?" Shatner yells. "For crying out loud, it's just a TV show. Look at you all. Look at the way you're dressed. You've turned an enjoyable little job I did as a lark for a few years into a colossal waste of time. Grow up already. Move out of your parents' basements. Get a life." Now, Javier didn't have a meltdown and go full William Shatner on me for being a fan of his podcast that night. But that skit did come back to mind, and I had to laugh to myself because it made me wonder how it must feel for content creators or celebrities when fans like me get a little too excited. Now, to be clear, I'm not throwing any kind of shade at Javier Leiva. He's always been a gracious host and a super nice guy at these events, and Pretend actually remains my favorite show to this day. Thank you, Javier, and kudos to you and to Pretend. But for me, that night I suddenly realized the excitement and the thrill was gone. When I got home, the books went up on a shelf, the podcast gear into a box, and out to the storage closet. And just like that, the urge was gone. Or was it? Fast forward almost 2 years. One night, while doom scrolling on TikTok, I saw a video of a recent hot air balloon tragedy in Brazil. 13 of the 21 people on board died when the balloon they were riding in caught fire and plummeted to the ground. And my very first thought was, thank God I've never had the urge to fly in a hot air balloon. That thought was followed by another, a memory of a story I'd once heard about a boy who had always wanted to fly. And for his 18th birthday, his parents gave him a skydiving jump. But tragically, the chute failed. The reserve failed, and both he and his instructor fell to their deaths while his parents watched in horror from the ground. That story had stuck with me, and I remember thinking at the time, thank goodness I've never had the urge to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And then I wondered, what else in life have I never had the urge to do? Climb Mount Everest? Nope, never had the urge to freeze on some mountaintop. Run with the bulls? Nope, never had the urge to get stabbed by a bull's horn. Go on a wild safari? Nah, I'm good. I don't feel like getting eaten by a lion. Get married even? Nah, that's not for me. Never had the urge to do that either. The list was endless with things I've never had the urge to do. And I realized these couldn't just be my thoughts. They can't be. Everybody thinks like this, don't they? I imagine everyone having their own never have I had the urge stories. But here's the thing, sometimes we end up doing them anyway, even when we didn't have the urge. Sometimes with no consequences at all, sometimes with hilarious ones, and sometimes, unfortunately, with tragic results. That's when it clicked, and I realized maybe the urge isn't always the point. Maybe it's what happens afterward that is. This podcast is about those very moments, the ones where we say, not me, until suddenly, yes, me. So let me ask you, what's something you've never had the urge to do? Did you do it anyway? I'd love to know. Share your stories with us. Join me next time as we dig into one of those taboo urges that many of us whisper about, but most of us never actually do. Until now. This episode was written and produced by me, your host, Victor Jimenez, and edited by the lovely and talented Invisible Woman. And always remember, behind every want lies an urge. Behind every urge, there's a need. Until next time, thank you for joining me. By the way, if you've never seen that classic William Shatner Get a Life sketch from Saturday Night Live, I've added it to my YouTube channel in the Extras and Inspirations playlist, so you can watch the clip for yourself. It's hilarious. Go check it out. What you just heard was the original pilot episode in its entirety. Thank you for taking the time to listen and walking through this first season with me. I'm looking forward to sharing more stories with you in 2026. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. I'll see you next year. Thanks.